Open this meeting at 9 o'clock, Tuesday, November 28th. We're here to discuss the SAUSA federal prosecutor proposal, although I'd rather call it SAUSA. It just seems more seasoned. But, Mr. Prosecutor, what do you have on for us on this?
So, SAUSA, as the acronym is used, stands for Special Assistant United States Attorney. SAUSAs are a specialized type of U.S. attorney that's authorized under federal law by specific appointment. SAUSAs can serve a number of capacities. One of them, which we're seeing more commonly utilized, is the designation of a state-level prosecutor who is given authorization by the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute cases federally as a special assistant U.S. attorney. These positions are established on a case-by-case basis. More recently, we've seen them implemented or utilized to help areas of particular high drug trafficking or other specific areas of criminal activity that are historically plaguing certain populations or geographical areas. In the state of Idaho, a SAUSA was appointed a few years back to help address the drug trafficking that was occurring through primarily through Keenan and Ada counties on the I-84 corridor. The U.S. Attorney's Office had reached out to myself about a half a year ago and wanted to discuss really what the drug trafficking and crime rates looked like coming through the North Idaho area, particularly on the I-90 corridor. As I know this board's aware, because you've seen some of the numbers I've put in front of you, the current criminal caseload numbers we have, particularly as they pertain to the type of work the U.S. Attorney's Office was interested in, are at quite alarming levels right now. That information was relayed to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and thereafter the U.S. Attorney's Office asked if I would be willing to sit down and chat with a member of the governor's Esto Perpetua Task Force, which is a task force that was assembled by our governor in an attempt to help address the drug trafficking epidemic that we're seeing in our area. The individual on that task force who is responsible for representation in this area is Luke Malik. He is based out of the Coeur d'Alene area, and you may be aware of him through the political realm. I did have a meeting with Mr. Malik. I also had another follow-up meeting with the U.S. Attorney for the state of Idaho, Mr. Josh Hurwitz, and through the course of those indicated that I did believe that there is a need for additional resources that can be placed in our jurisdiction on behalf of the federal government. And I did indicate that I thought potentially part of the void that we're seeing right now in our ability as a county to address these issues with the resources we have could be filled by assistance from the federal government. In light of that, my office has been working behind the scenes with Mr. Malik on behalf of the Esto Perpetua Task Force and Mr. Hurwitz on behalf of the U.S. Attorney's Office to explore what a potential proposal might look like for the appointment of a special assistant U.S. attorney that could be assigned to our area to help address this issue. The benefit that can result from this type of a specialized assignment is the ability for the federal government to take cases that are generated by our local law enforcement agencies, whether they be city police departments, whether they be our county sheriff's office, or whether it be the Idaho State Police and some of their patrol emphasis that they periodically do in our jurisdiction. That federal prosecutor would be able to take cases out of the state court system and file them in the federal court system if certain criteria or thresholds are met. therefore reducing the workload and burden on our county employees, i.e. the court system, the clerks, and even your prosecuting attorney's office, and to be able to move those into the federal court system where federal resources could be utilized for the prosecution of that case and ultimately for any subsequent incarceration that may result. With all of that said, I really just wanted to bring this matter to the BOCC's attention so you were aware of what I've been trying to do behind the scenes to help address this issue, which I think goes hand in hand with really what I'm trying to do creatively to help address the staffing issues in my office in the interim. And I think that this idea, although it certainly predates some of those issues, can be utilized in such a way that it can accomplish multiple goals of the county in helping to get crime off of our streets, reduce the financial burden to our taxpayers, and reduce the workload to our county employees and our court system otherwise. So that's the update I have for you. We're still very much in the planning phases when we're at a point planning-wise where we actually have something to propose to the elected bodies that make decisions on behalf of our public entities, that being both the BOCC at the county level and likely city councils at the city level. I'll certainly put this back on your calendar and we can actually discuss what sort of arrangements all three sides have come to as far as something we think might be amenable for our jurisdiction. But at this point, we're still in the planning stage. I'm just advising you of what I have been working on so you're aware of some of the work that we're putting in behind the scenes to help address this issue right now.
So, if I understood that right, cases that would have to wait for us with our limited resources could be shifted to the federal court system, which would obviously take some of the time burden off, which is what our backlog.
Yeah, that's the goal of it. They're typically in these SAUSA appointments, there is oftentimes required a form of cost sharing. The structure that is utilized typically makes the employee a local government employee. So they technically are not a federal employee. They just receive federal authorization to utilize the federal court system for filing cases. So what we've seen where this has been utilized in other areas of our country in the past is the federal government will pay a portion of the cost for that employee's wages. They'll typically funnel that to a local government entity who's going to actually house the employee. The local government entity would then cover the remaining cost of that employee's wages and benefits as part of a cost-sharing agreement. And thereafter, the goal is for that employee to be able to analyze the cases as they come into the state court system and then redirect them to the federal court system. So the end result is, although it's felt certainly by the prosecuting attorney's office, in most circumstances, that individual is actually an employee. So it helps to fill one of the employment roles within the office, while the trade-off is most noticeably felt at the court level, where your court clerks, your staff, your judges, things like that aren't having to handle that as an additional case filing. So they may not ever even see the case come through their system because it would be redirected into the federal court system. So that's typically how these play out. Like I said, the logistics of what I think might be manageable for our jurisdiction are still very much in the planning phase. The benefit, I think, is huge no matter how you spin it, and it has a particular benefit to your court system. So your court clerks, your staff, your judges, etc., they're going to see the largest benefit of all of the departments. Your prosecuting attorney's office is going to see a benefit in that we'll have partial funding for an employee. So that's the benefit. The case would still come through our office, though, hypothetically speaking. So the amount of work that's seen by the prosecuting attorney's office that houses this employee won't actually go down. It'll be the same number of cases that come through our office, but we'll be able to redirect that case into a different court system to save everyone else post-filing. And then we'll obviously be able to reap the benefit of having federal funding come in to help pay for that employee. So that's really how the benefit trickles down. It seems like a win-win for everyone on its face, which usually results in the rhetorical question, well, why isn't every county trying to do this? And the answer to that is twofold, in my opinion. I think the first reason why is because your county has to be identified as a location where the feds are willing to say we want to put our resources there. So I don't think every county necessarily fits that mold. I think Shoshone is unique in that regard, and I think we have the type of crime rates and numbers per capita that are very alarming, and the federal government does want to help us address. So I think that makes us a candidate to even have the discussion. On the back end, even some of the jurisdictions that may fit that mold, some of them are averse to having federal government involvement in their business. I personally am not one of them. I think our federal prosecutors do a phenomenal job of prosecuting crimes. Obviously, I'm a little biased in that I've spent time with the U.S. Attorney's Office early on in my career, but I have seen the work they do, and I think they do a very nice job. And if we can take a case that would otherwise be local and we can shift it to the federal court system, almost undoubtedly, I would say that case would benefit from that shift of venue. So,
And we're talking about the drug crimes, federal drug crimes that are happening in our county, and that's what
that would be the emphasis.
Yeah.
Could it entail other kinds of cases?
It could, and that's part of the discussions that I'm having. The BOCC may or may not be aware, but we've had a whole handful of white-collar crimes that have been investigated and charged in our county in the last year. That number is way up from what we usually have seen. And those types of cases often have some sort of a federal nexus and have the ability to potentially go the federal route. I know at least two of those cases I've asked the feds to step in voluntarily and help assist or to take over those cases when they've popped up. And they've been very helpful in that regard in providing assistance to us on those types of cases. But that is also something that I'm going to be discussing with the U.S. Attorney to identify when those cases pop back up. If we do have a SAUSA that is located in our county as part of my office, would they have authorization to also take those cases that could go federal that are white-collar cases, which we may not otherwise have the resources or the knowledge and experience within our investigation teams to go out and address appropriately.
So in the end, we shift some burden from the property tax to the federal government, and they're partnering in this, and they're willing to pay for it. So that's the big win for a lot of county elected, and we continue to prosecute crime.
Yes, sir.
Excellent work.
Yes.
Well, I'm hopeful that we might be able to see this through to the finish line. Obviously, like I said, there's a lot of negotiating that has to happen as you're planning. And certainly nothing has been reduced to writing for presentation to any one of the sides. It's going to involve three players. The U.S. Attorney's Office has to sign off on it at the federal level. The Esto Perpetua Task Force is going to have to sign off on it on behalf of the governor's office in the state. And then the local jurisdictions are going to have to agree. So we've got to strike a balance that fits everyone's needs. But I think the upside to it, if we can make it happen, has a very large potential for our local taxpayer base. So
That's a fantastic idea. Any questions or comments from the board? It's a great idea.
No, awesome work as usual.
appreciate it. Thank
Comments,
you.
questions
Anything
from-
that you would need from us, then we'll be here to back it. I
I'll
will.
let you guys know.
No, we all.
Comments or questions from the public?
Yes, you said it was partial. reimbursed by the feds, what kind of number are you talking partial? 50%, 40% for the wages and benefits?
That's part of what's negotiated, and I think that it contemplates how much work the parties anticipate would be done working federal cases as opposed to working local state cases. As an employee of the local jurisdiction, it would be contemplated that they would still have a case assignment at the state level. So there may be cases that come in that they're assigned to prosecute within the state court system that don't get a chance to make it federal, or maybe there's not the federal nexus. So there's still a local component to it. And so part of what the caseload balance looks like oftentimes dictates part of what the parties are able to negotiate as far as cost sharing.
So I guess my next question is, most federal attorneys are a couple $100,000 a year. We could actually get stuck for $100,000 roughly. I mean, just throw it out there on payments for this attorney.
So I would counter by saying I don't think any of our local jurisdictions would be stuck with anything. They would get to see the number presented to them in the form of a contract before they would approve it.
Right.
So they would be aware of what that number is.
Right. I'm just throwing it out there. For 50%, they're making a couple $100,000 a year. And then on the other hand, how is that going to affect you getting other prosecuting attorneys to come in here when you got somebody we're paying $100,000 to? You guys are what, 89,000?
It's a very real dilemma, and I wish I had other options available to me at the moment, Mr. Beener.
And I got one other question. If this was such a good deal, you've been looking for a third or fourth part-time, then full-time attorney for 2 years. Why didn't we go out this route back then?
It wasn't presented to me back then.
Okay.
Which I appreciate you jumping on. I think they need to work it to its end and see what kind of arrangement could be had. Good questions. Okay. Anything further, Mr. Prosecutor? I realize you're in the middle of the process.
I think that's a full summary.
That was a good summary. Okay. Anything
you very
further
much.
from the board?
No, thanks, Ben, for all your work.
You bet.
Always.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Well, with that, we are adjourned.